Hello, everyone. I am Chris Gazdick, and Kasie Morgan is with us again. She's right over there.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
So this is through a therapist's eyes. Now, we are battling illnesses basically like everyone else in the world. So we are Zooming today. That blew up our Facebook Live. So we'll have to pick that up next week. We are all being flexible because, whatever happened to this phrase, Kasie, we're all in this together, right?
Yeah, but if you'll remember, I have distinctly said on this show multiple times, we're all in the same storm, we're just in different boats. And so today we're going to be in different locations due to the COVID.
Right. So it is a crazy world we're living in, but this is Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast, where I like to say you get personal insights from a therapist in your own home and personal time in your car. You get to see the world through the lens of a therapist. And Casey's month, this is the last week, I believe, right? And
Yeah.
you get
Next week is February.
Already, my birthday month, though. It's my birthday month.
Oh, when's your birthday?
Yeah, I'm not telling you because you'll be weird in the office.
Oh, I'll look it up on the collective calendar that DW.
Wait, it's your birthday, Chris? It's my wife and my oldest kid's birthday is February 2.
Oh, really? Well, what's their date?
I won't tell you. You won't tell us ours. You won't tell us yours.
Well, maybe I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours.
It's the 9th and the 24th.
Okay, mine's close. Anyway, so see how I did that? No, it is February the 25th, if you must know. Let me see. So see the world through the lens of two therapists, but no, this is not the delivery of therapy services in any way. And listen, guys, we love doing the show and we really need your help to grow the show. And it makes a big deal for you to give us the 5-star reviews, give us a couple of reviews on Apple iTunes. That really makes a big difference. It helps us get found around the world so that we can do what we want to do, which is blow up stereotypes and myths about mental health and substance abuse and disseminate good information. So if you like the show, help the show. Contact at throughatherapist's.com is also a great way to get onto our website. You can kind of type your little thing into the search and you get all the shows that we have out for that particular topic that you might be interested in. Because we got some shows. We've been doing it. We got like $180 now or so.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're pushing towards 180 soon. The human emotional experience. That's what this is. Let's figure this out together. Kasie, I have not given you the opportunity to, kind of tell people how they can find you, what they can do to do therapy with you if they're local, or anything else that they want to know and how they would get up with you, LinkedIn or whatnot. How do these people find you?
Yeah, so there's a plethora of ways that you can connect to me. So first and foremost, directly from Metrolina Psychotherapy and Associates webpage, my contact information is present on there. If you are local to the Mount Holly, Huntersville, Gastonia, Denver kind of area, Charlotte, and you want to do a face-to-face session with me, then you can find my information there. You can simply call into the office at 704-461-8253, or my email is on the website there. But if you're kind of distanced from us and you're in the state of North Carolina and you would like a virtual session, and you can do that by connecting with me via email, and I can get you hooked up with my schedule so that we can get an appointment scheduled for you. I'm also on LinkedIn, Kasie Morgan, LCMHCQS, that stands for Qualified Supervisor. And if you are on the Facebook, I do have a Mindful Moment with Kasie Facebook page where I just kind of throw out some mindfulness moments and give some commentary sometimes on, just a mindful pause for your day and things like that. So yeah,
That's cool.
I am kind of everywhere. You can Google me. You won't find very much from Google other than, I'm a therapist, but that's about it. So
that gave me the opportunity to make Neil proud of me and my buddy Adrian, who's always on me to get my hardwire plug into the computer, because if I don't, I sometimes don't have the best internet connection. So I apologize if I zoned out there for a second. And I don't know if we're using this video, I guess on YouTube. Yeah, you'll see the video on YouTube. I had to put my wire in, so that's why I got up. And I don't know. This is just, it's COVID, man. We're just working the weird world we're living in, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're just kind of thriving, right? Like, you just have to call audible sometimes and do what you can to make sure some of this stuff gets up and out of it, and gets produced. So we're going to do the best we can tonight.
We are on it. So I think that what are we doing? Dating after demise sounds like a terrifying topic title. Like, wow, dating after the demise of your life. That sounds so terrible.
And so
the next relationship is not a rebound. The harsh truth of relationships is that they sometimes end. You know what? I want to give off the front end here. This is for all people that are dating. I love the title, and I'd be curious to see where we go all with it, Kasie. But you know what I've told people about dating? Check this out. This is a real statement. When you hear this statement, you're going to be kind of like down in the dumps and depressed with it because it sounds horrible, but it's really a truism. And I think it speaks to the challenge that dating and those types of relationships really are. So think about this. 100% of the time, dating relationships will end until the last time. Right? Now, that sucks. I mean, that's like not for the, wicked, for the weary, right? Like that's not for the faint of heart. Dating can be really a risk and a challenge with your emotions. So I don't know where you're going with this, Kasie. We'll venture along the way, but I've always used that quote to kind of demonstrate the power and the challenge of what we're doing when we're really dating. It's not easy. It's very, very difficult times, even when they're fun.
Exactly. And I think it can be difficult as the dating landscape has just evolved so drastically over the last little bit, really even in the last 10 years, 5 years, even almost daily, the daily landscape is shifting for the dating population. So, before I got married, there wasn't really like a strong online dating presence.
Right.
And
that's relatively brand new for the human race.
Right. And so if something were to happen to my relationship currently, like I wouldn't know really how to do the dating thing that people are doing right now. Like I really wouldn't know what to do. It would be like the blind leading the blind.
It kind of is. I mean, for older fogies like me with the Gen Xers, man, we don't date with like video and all that kind of stuff. I can't tell you how many times in my therapy office people have like struggled, and I've learned a lot, but they're like, what am I supposed to do? I have older people like 60, 70 years old that are jumping on, even like Facebook's got a dating site now and all. And we're not going to go, by the way, into like the online dating thing. We're just wrapping a little bit here in the get-go. So this show isn't on that, I think, but it's really is a new and different world in the way that we make connections and all. So Neil, you don't have to come on with your voice, Neil, but just listen, like that quote is not a quote. I just want to point that out. So he doesn't write that one down. Y'all, what I'm saying is we're gathering quotes together, and we might be doing some fun things in 2022 with that. So stay tuned on that. It's going to be fun to use some of the things that we say and have some of the quotes. But 100% of the time, dating relationships will end until the last time is not one of the quotes, Neil, that I want to use, bro. Okay, let's get that out.
Yeah, but it is a harsh truth that a lot of times our dating relationships are going to end, or they're going to evolve in a way that doesn't lead to a long-term situation or marriage, or they don't progress into what we thought that they would be. And so we end up with some type of ending. And so endings can look like relationship breakups, separation if you're married, divorce, a long-term separation, because I have some people in my office that have been separated for 11 years, and so they're in a long-term separation.
Right.
Death of a partner or spouse. But regardless of the path that you're on, today's session or today's topic is going to be for you, because chances are you have had a relationship that has reached its end at some point. So then the thought process becomes, then what? Kind of like, what's next? And that kind of brings us to today's topic, because what I find in people that I work with, and really when I reflect back on my own life, is that need, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, for that companionship, connection, essential connection, a life partner, things like that, sometimes will drive our brain and body to quickly want to fill that void, fill that hole, take care of that feeling. And we do it in a way that is counterproductive to being a healthy person. And so that's really what we want to talk about today.
So Kasie, I'm curious. Let me ask you a question. When you think of that, now what stage that people get into, how would you characterize that time frame, that space that people get into? How would you just generally characterize that?
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of set that up for you. It really is. It's the grief process. Yes, right. And we'll talk about that some more too, but it's really the grief process, like where perhaps you were used to going to bed with a person and the next day, right? The day after, you wake up on your tear-soaked pillow, you sit up in your bed and you are completely and utterly by yourself.
Right.
And so even though the world continues, you need life to kind of stop in that moment so you can have a life break, but it doesn't. And you either have to get up and move on. It's kind of like a pivotal moment, right? You either have to get up and move on or stay stuck. And so the question becomes, now what? Like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And you have to take it forward.
I just, wow, you did a really amazing job there of poignantly describing, that moment. And what's funny? I want to offer right up here at the get-go a little bit of hope about that. Because I think it is a terrifying time and a time of grief and a time of like, typically after a relationship is end and you've met its demise, where you took me actually is driving home from the hospital with my little kiddo in the car seat, new parent, hand on the baby, other hand on the steering wheel the entire way home from the hospital, walking in the home. I think I carried the baby. Maybe she did. The baby was set down on the couch and we literally both like took 3 steps backwards and just stood there and stared at that thing. And it was a total, I mean, nobody said anything, but I know she and I were locked in to the exact same sense of like, now what?
Yeah.
And so this is a time where something bad has happened, a relationship has ended maybe, or maybe it's not so bad. Maybe you actually chose to do the ending and needed to do that. The now what really can be, and here's my point, a time of opportunity and opening and newness. Now that could be scary, but that can also be a wonderful transition in life. So I just don't want it to have to be always a time of grief and loss and, horror.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely don't think it has to be grief and loss and horror, but I also think even if you are the one that makes the decision to end the relationship, there is a processing of the loss of the relationship in some way. And so as this continues to unfold, we'll talk about that a little bit, about what are secondary losses, so that even if you are the one that ends the relationship, there are secondary losses that come with any kind of ending of a relationship. So what I came across was this really cool blog. It's called Cake, Cake. It's a really cool blog, and MIT, and
Cake.
I was not Googling cake. I was not Googling that. Okay. I was thinking about relationships. Although I did make some really good cookies out of cake mix, if anybody wants to know about that on the later.
That's no digression at all whatsoever.
Yeah. But Cake is this blog, and MIT and Harvard alums have really produced this blog to talk through mental health topics and relationships. And so I'm figuring that, a lot of this stuff probably has a lot of research quality and can be vetted, right?
Yeah, Harvard people studied, MIT, right. They're little intellectuals.
Yeah, just somewhat intellectual, right? So this Dr. Alejandra Vasquez is an attorney, but she's also a grief counselor. And so she put forth several of the ideas that I'm going to talk through today. But I wanted you to know that this information came from that blog. And I think that it's really cool because this is researched information. a lot of this is evidence based on studies that were conducted by MIT and Harvard professionals.
So if you follow the show, I usually do the show prep. Kasie's mother, she jumps in and allows me to do some other things. She does show prep, so I don't know the show prep. But as you're talking, I look down there, and you're talking about this has been researched. So I would like to know how point number 1 has been researched. That's my question. Point number 1 is sex is fun.
I'm sorry, you haven't had sex. If you just talk about having a baby, sex is fun.
I want to know the research methods. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, well, ask your wife if you haven't researched lately. I don't know what to tell you about that. That's a whole show in and of itself.
Yeah, that's a whole nother level. That's a whole nother digression there. Let's get control of ourselves. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So let's address first things first. Sex is fun, but that's not this topic, so that is, what I would venture to say is that there are probably times in life, and I do believe this to be true, and please comment if you feel differently. And it's kind of nice to see the difference maybe between the girl brain and the guy brain. But I believe that there are times in life when we are completely okay with having purely a sexual relationship with somebody. It doesn't have to have a lot of commitment. Sometimes it doesn't have to have a lot of understanding of an emotionally intimate moment and things like that. But essentially, the majority of human beings want a steadfast connection with another person that doesn't have to be only based on sexual attractiveness.
Let me blow up a myth.
Go ahead.
Here's the reality. First of all, sexual process and whatnot is not really gendered. There are many women that absolutely are very much more sexual than guys. There are many guys that are just uninterested in sex. That's goes more along the lines of our relationship orientation and attachment with emotion in the abandonment and engulfment tendencies. Engulfment folks tend to want to shut things down a little bit more and aren't as emotional. But the big myth that I want to blow up here, or actually aren't as overtly externally emotional. We're all emotional. But the big myth that I want to blow up here is it's going to be leading, so you could probably easily answer this, Kasie. What's the reason why people go to prostitutes for those encounters? Do you know the primary reason that's well researched and known? In my travels, I've come across this. What they usually really want?
Someone to talk to.
Yeah. People do not go, and this blew my brain apart when I went to this. And I think that's what you're laying out is it's the companionship. It's the conversation. It's the connection. That's what we're striving for. That's what, when a relationship ends, we miss. It's the connections that we have and try to forge. And so a lot of times people that have been in my therapy office that are recovering from or engaged in that lifestyle and those things, they'll tell me, yeah, guys, just, people just, they contract and they don't want to be sexual. I mean, it's probably a part of it at some point, maybe, but the vast majority of what they want to do is just talk.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? They pay up for a whole hour or whatever. And most of the time is there for discussion, talk, and chat. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a really important point, because when a relationship reaches its end, however it comes to be, what is left is a void. And it doesn't matter if you're the person that broke up with someone or you're the person that was broken up with, it leaves a void. And that void is what we try to fill with things that we think can suffice, right? So sometimes we do that with sexual partners. Sometimes we do it with substances. Sometimes we do it with gambling. Sometimes we do it with something that makes us feel something. But the truth is those things are temporary fixes, because exactly what you said is true. What we really want is connection. What we really want is community, connection, friendship, a genuineness in an intimate way to emotionally connect to another person. Now, sometimes we don't find that immediately. And so we do kind of date around. But when that loneliness creeps in after a loss, we have to be really cognizant on what is our motivation. And by that, I mean, we really have to think through, what is it that when we go out or when we feel like we're ready or prepared to enter into another dating situation, what is the motivation for trying to find another person? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. And Kasie, I think, what I want to maybe you'll cover this later on. And if I'm jumping out of scope, that's fine. But look, I happen to believe that this particular time in somebody's life, when a relationship ends and they're feeling that loneliness and whatnot, I've come to believe, sort of anecdotally, I'm curious what you think about this, Kasie, that's the most decompensated point in people's lives oftentimes that they get to. Yeah. Her head is like wildly shaking. Yes, y'all. So like you got to realize, like, this is a painful spot. And what we've got to be very careful about is how, like, exactly you're talking, Kasie, how people go about dealing with that pain. Because when we have that level of pain, people make really poor choices sometimes and go towards destructive means to make those ends meet in our emotional need. So yeah, I don't know if you were going to pull that in, but I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, I think that's completely relevant and very important to discuss, because even if you know yourself and you know that you go towards destructive means, you may also swing in the opposite direction of complete isolation and withdrawal, right? So even though you may not be actively doing something destructive to yourself, like substance use, gambling, sex, things like that, withdrawing completely from your life, retreating within yourself in that decompensation phase, it is just as dangerous in a lot of ways for you to be in that space. So the first thing,
well, here's a quote. Here's a quote that I like to put out. I don't know if it's one that we want to use, Neil, or not, but first of all, grief and loss mimic depression, right? And so thousands of times over and over and over again, when we're talking about depression, enemy number one to depression is isolation. Actually, that is a good quote. I say that all the time. I'm sure you know that, Kasie. When people are depressed, they'll isolate. Well, when you're grieving, you'll isolate also. And it is I don't want to overstate it, dramatize it too much, but it is a dangerous time. And I love your point. You don't want to be alone. Enemy number one to depression is isolation. Same for grief.
Right. But I think that also doesn't mean to go out and jump into another relationship, which is kind of what we're going to get to today as well. So the first question you can ask yourself is, have you processed your grief appropriately? And to answer that question, I think that we think about it kind of one way, which is the loss of the person, right? So I'm grieving the loss of the relationship. But the truth is that there are what's called secondary losses that are often experienced in a relationship that we don't often think about when we talk about how things have ended. We don't often think about that this goes beyond that person physically being there. So that emotional intimacy that's lost is gravely significant and goes beyond just the physical presence of a person. Go ahead, Chris, what we're going to say.
You might need to dumb it down. This sounds very clinical in secondary losses. I am curious as to what a secondary loss might mean.
Okay. So it would mean that...
Did I do that well with the posing of question?
Yeah. So the first loss, right, is that the relationship has ended. That's a loss, right?
Right.
We're grieving that loss. Secondary losses would be other things, other losses that come with that person leaving your life in some way, right? So physically they've stepped out. Now emotionally is that first kind of secondary realm that we look at, right? So emotionally that person is gone. Then what we don't often think about is your own identity. Who am I without that person in my life? And if you're married, this comes up a lot of times, like even when you're around like your extended family or your in-laws, right? So when you get introduced to your in-laws, it's, oh, this is my, this is my son, Chris, and this is his wife, Lisa, right? So this is Chris's wife. This is Chris's wife. This is Chris's wife. It becomes part of her identity structure, right? And that's how it is when we're in relationships. So when we're around different groups of people, part of our identity structure becomes about who the person that we're with and how they are and what their relationship is to our friend groups. Also, we usually have intermingled friend groups, right? So a lot of the people we hang out with are a coexisting group of people. So then part of that identity that's lost is thinking about like, well, are they my friends or their friends? And when we separate our relationship, do they get those friends and I take other friends, or what's going on here? So that identity piece of who am I without this person is something that can be a loss. Do you think that that's true, Chris?
Absolutely. You know what's funny? I don't know how much we're going to be staying on the topic of grief and everything tonight. Usually I do this by saying, hey, episode 97 or whatever, we did a show on grief and loss. So you need to check that out if you're checking this show out. I had the opportunity to kind of go ahead and Google on our website. I used the search button on the page. Do you know we have not done a show exclusively on grief and loss? How is that even possible? I don't even know. 2 years in, this is crazy. This is a revelation, because we're going to do that. So keep a lookout. Soon you will see an entire show on grief and loss, because it's a big deal. It's a big part of the life that we leave. And the thing that I like that you're talking about, we won't have time to go all into it. I will on the grief show. I have a different process of going through grief. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross gave us, bargaining and the anger phase, the 4 stages of grief. Well, there's different ways to go through a grieving process. I like this thing that I have that's the task of grieving, the tasks of grieving. And one of the tasks, you're totally hitting on it right now, with the idea of understanding what the loss is, meaning there's a lot of, you're calling it secondary losses, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes into, I thought this woman was going to be my wife, and they're not going to be, with me when our son graduates high school. Like, I'm not going to celebrate that with them. That's part of the loss. There's so many things that you have to realize that you're grieving in order to go through it all. Otherwise, it just gets stored up inside of you, and you re-experience it later on when those situations come out. So yeah, you have to know what you're grieving.
Yeah, for sure. And so then another area too that I think is, sometimes our finances are intertwined. And so the convenience of like the financial situation is completely disrupted. And so you go through that kind of financial anxiety. And we talked about, debt and things like that on our previous show. And so you go through that financial kind of crisis and anxieties that come with, how do I do this on my own? What does this even look like? And
it's
that
scary.
can be it's very scary, like a breakup and divorce, to my, last night I went to bed with my husband. This morning I woke up and he had a massive heart attack. So now what? And you get into that financial crisis about what's next in that way as well. And then we touched on the friendships, and these are just a few examples, but there's a lot of undiscovered losses, like Chris is saying, that come to you as time progresses. And if you're not really through that grieving process, they're going to come out like that. It's going to manifest itself some way in your life. And so maybe it's not you just sitting around crying tears on your pillow, but now you've developed this unreasonable road rage, or you've just
unreasonable road rage.
Yeah, and you just went off on like the grocery clerk in the grocery store. It's coming out,
or more so
one way or another,
or more so a lot of times what I really find that we're working with in therapy, Kasie, and I'm sure you've seen it, you really want to deal with these types of things, because it will come out in your next relationship, when you're ready to progress, and in your marriage number 2, or even just dating, you experience these things that you experience, and if you leave them unaddressed, then they will be a part of your ongoing relationships when you make new attachments. That's why this is like really important when you're looking at the what's next question.
Yeah. And you can even find yourself slipping into a new relationship, but then also feeling depressed at the same time. And a lot of people always say for no apparent reason. But the truth is there is a reason.
There are reasons. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, reasons for sure. So having honest conversations with yourself about where things are for you is a really good solution in that moment, is to really check in with you. Where are things for you? And to really be honest about that, because this, of all the things we talk about, I cannot stress this enough. This is the normal process of what a person experiences when a relationship ends. Grieving is a normal process.
Right.
It is not abnormal to have these intensified feelings, to have that gut lowering, emotional, visceral reaction to the demise of a relationship. That is normal. That is
It's
not you
funny.
being crazy or
I'm
depressed.
I'm giggling, and it might be sounding inappropriate. I when I'm doing grief work with people in my office, I will tell them oftentimes, like, look, you're going to hear me repeat something over and over again. So let's just get it out of the way now, because I get questions all the time. Like, yeah, I'm doing this. Is that normal? And I'm like, yep, that's normal. Well, this is happening when I'm doing that. And I'm like, yep, that's normal. So I'm telling people, like, let's just get that out of the way in the front end of this thing. We're going to go through a grieving process. And basically, most everything that you're going to wonder about, is it normal? The gear is like, yeah,
Yeah.
people are experiencing that. Grief is a human experience, and it has commonalities between them. So usually when you're questioning that, it's normal.
Yeah. And it's also okay if you feel okay. For some people, the disruption of a relationship may have been a long time coming. So I don't want to discount your feelings as well. But the truth is, some people are really just okay. And that's also normal. So I don't want you to think that in any such a way that if you're not experiencing symptoms of grief, or if you're grieving in a different way, it belongs to the individual. So anything about this process that you may have questions about, as Chris has eloquently stated, is normal. So just know it appears in all different ways, but you have to check in with yourself.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, people have asked me, like, I didn't cry at this funeral. Is that, like, what's wrong with me? I'm like, no, like, that's normal. If again, I'm going to say that again. If you have the question, is happening to me, or I am doing X, is that normal? I really want you to start from a place of probably saying, yeah, I remember that. And you can check it out. You can kind of talk with people. In fact, I greatly encourage you to do it. But if you have that starting place, that takes so much energy out of what people are dealing with when they're dealing with a relationship ending, because they're like, I don't know, why am I feeling I'm not right? I should feel some sort of way, and I don't. Is that normal? Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit. So I am going to be primarily talking to the people who have been either broken up with or have experienced a significant loss through the death of a loved one or spouse.
Okay.
So these are relationships that have ended, and you are basically either the widow or you have been the person that has been broken up with. So brain fog is a non-clinical term, right? Brain fog. I feel like I have COVID brain fog right now, but
You poor thing.
brain fog is kind of the way that I describe what the body goes through when you are in a significant relationship and that relationship leaves by one means or another. And when that happens, you go into your kind of survival brain. And so you're able to function there, like you're able to maybe carry out day-to-day tasks. You may be able to go to work in a couple weeks or a couple days, depending on the situation. You're living your life. But I would arguably say you may not be making the most rational decisions about 3 to 6 months following the demise of this relationship in one form or another. Chris, I see you shaking your head. Yeah.
3 to 6 months? No, I'm kind of agreeing with you. And it's interesting because, again, grief mimics depression in a lot of ways. And actually, I'm kind of curious, Kasie. Brain fog is a clinical term, isn't it? You said it's not?
Probably.
I think it is.
Yeah, I think I'm just hypersensitive to my secondary losses part. So I think I'm, just having my feelings hurt a little bit over
I'm
here.
so sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, it is
Way
a
too
clinical term.
clinical.
And the thing is when you're grieving, you're mimicking a lot of what we experience with depression, to the point that
Yeah.
when somebody's dealing with a depressed spouse, I will use grief experience for them to develop some insight about what it is that they're coping with. Because when
Yeah.
you're in a depression episode, you're not on your game.
Mm-mm.
That's a symptom. That's just one of several, but it's a clear symptom that your brain is just kind of. And actually, the way I like to describe that to people that aren't depressed and aren't grieving, you know how you wake up and you're in that sort of zony space where you're just not thinking yet. Like, my wife will tell me, like, I don't want to talk in the morning. I'm not woke up. I'm trying to just wake up. Well, it's because you're foggy, man. You're not geared in yet.
Yeah.
And actually the clinical term would be you're a little dissociated, really,
Mhm.
is what's going on. So yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, and not to, make this the center focus of a topic, but when we have the ending of an essential connection, like a relationship or a marriage or the death of a spouse, you're talking about a trauma, whether it's big T, little t, or cumulative, like this is a traumatic experience. And when you go through a traumatic experience, your brain and body are hardwired to keep you alive. And so it puts you in that fog so you don't have to experience or re-experience that level of hurt over and over and over and over again every day. So it makes it kind of fuzzy and foggy. So you're able to at least, slow it down a little bit, go through the motions and things like that. It's saving you. And so it's working the way it's supposed to. But what it also does is it prevents you sometimes from making the most rational choices that you could make in your life. So you may have heard from somebody else in your life, like when you have an experience like this, don't make any decisions for whatever reason. They say 12 months, but like, don't make any decisions for 12 months. Like I hear that all the time. Like after someone passes away, don't date anybody for 12 months. And I'm like, these rules are a little interesting, but I get it. The reason what they're talking about is to allocate for this exact thing, to get back to a place of rationality where you're making really good sound decisions and choices, where you're on top of your game, when you're feeling yourself, where you're back on your feet, things like that. So I get it, but I don't know if we need to put like, lots of rules and dates around it. Like,
yeah, and I'm glad the rules and dates is coming up as a topic, because I mean, we are covering a lot of the things that we'll cover specifically with grief, because you know we oftentimes really wonder about how is this supposed to last. I mean, 3 to 6 months, that sounds like a long time. Everyone's listening, I'm thinking and saying, right? Well, yeah, it takes a little while for your emotions to kind of, weave themselves back into some sort of normalcy for you, even when something major has changed, like your husband has died and whatnot. So I will offer this though as a way of time frame for really any major traumatic event or grieving loss like this. I like to tell people that it's not measured in days. Like, you're not going to get over this in days. Okay. It's also not measured in weeks. People wonder, like, how long am I going to feel this way? Well, it's not measured in years either. What I tell people is your process really is along your lines, and there's no hard and fast rule, but we can measure it by months. That might be 18, but that might be 4. There's a great variation here. But again, if as long as you're in that time frame, this is normal to have this adjustment period. And also actually kind of cool. Let me go back to where you just brought us, Kasie, in those teaching moments, and pull back from last week's chat about us being enough, about our bodies being like you're so cool in the way that you describe our bodies and minds and process is designed to kind of help us to get us through. So if you're listening out there, you're grieving, you've been smacked upside the head, major life change, your body's actually in really neat way giving you a way to cope. And it's designed that way. Like, how cool is that? Really?
Yeah. I think it's so cool, because if you don't hear me say anything else to you today, please hear me to tell you this. You are who you are on purpose. And if you don't believe me, just consider your biology and how it keeps you going even after experiencing some of the toughest debilitating emotional experiences like breakups, divorces, and things like that. You are you on purpose. And so I just want you to hear that today.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so this next concept is another one that I absolutely love. And I didn't really even think about this until I started reading this article on that blog. Love does not know boundaries in the same way that we want to put boundaries around it. So we often think that when a previous relationship ends and we do find ourselves in a space where we're ready to move on and we're ready to move into another relationship, that we just can't possibly start another relationship without having full closure on the previous relationship or full resolution to that emotional experience. And I know people and have known people who have waited years and years and years and years and years because they're like, I'm just not over it. I'm just not over it. It is not dishonoring. It is not, a tell to the other person. It is not a nod. It's not a negative. I think that was a double negative, but anyway, it's not dishonoring to another person if you feel like you are moving on in a meaningful way. It's you're not dishonoring yourself or another person.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, Kasie. Yeah, people, they're 60 years old, their 70-year-old husband had a heart attack, and you can feel like it's my responsibility to honor them, and I'm doomed to be companionless. And what I hear you're really doing is really a kind service to people out there, to give you permission to emotionally and appropriately engage attachments, because that's a more than okay thing to do.
Yeah.
It's not religiously inconsistent. It's in any teachings I come across, and teachings of faith traditions usually run parallel with what I know about mental health. And I think this is a piece that a lot of times people won't think about, right? So and also I would just add real quick, it's also, I think I hear you also saying, Kasie, it ain't never going to be fully resolved. This is a
No.
before and after life event, man. It ain't never going to be the same, and that's okay.
Yeah. And you don't need to go back to the way things were, because obviously that didn't work out. Standing why it didn't work out so you can move on in a more positive direction. It can, and I want to make this abundantly clear. The only person that you're dishonoring is maybe yourself if you choose to rebound in an immediate relationship purely for sexual or serial dating reasons. Now, I want to make a qualifying statement here. Okay. Going back to point number 1, sex is fun. Okay. If your motivation, which we talked about earlier, if the motivation of your actions is just to have fun, then cool. But if the motivation is to begin a relationship or to try to fill a void of, needing companionship, going in a serial dating fashion, going in a hookup fashion, it is not going to do it for you. And so you are dishonoring your values by participating in a situation like that, is what I'm saying.
Got
Do you have
you.
thoughts, Chris?
I do. Just to parrot that and maybe say it in a different way to reinforce it, right? Like, so
Yeah.
first of all, like, we are clinicians. I love to say that, counselors are, I've heard it said this way, and I agree. We're either counselors that do Christian counseling or Christians that do counseling. And I fall in the latter variety, and I'm pretty open with people, not real pushy about faith traditions. I'll work with you, from whatever creed you might follow. But I'm also very comfortable in including that in our practice together in therapy world. So all those, and I think those are the qualifications that I give. But the thing that's in operation here, that's most important, is that we and I hear you coming from this angle, Kasie. Like, it's about, look, I will roll with you in whatever direction you want to go in therapy. I'm not going to direct you and push you, and I don't have any agenda. I love to tell people I don't have any dog in the fight. It's your life, not mine. But I do want to provide information and gear you in a way that can help you to understand destructive tendencies and potential outcomes to choices that you might make that might have a devastating result emotionally for you. So having fun with relationships is very different than trying to fill the void. So we're giving you a little bit of a perspective that is not on a theological perspective, that is not on a moral perspective, that's not on a value-based perspective. It's really on a mental health perspective. That's what we're about. Does that make sense, Kasie?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I heard you having that perspective. So it's what's emotionally sound. And try and fill a void with some, crazy man or some crazy woman that's going to be your next rebound dating relationship, and think that's going to go well. Like, it's stressful dating, y'all. When you're stressed out and you want to date again, like, be prepared, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'll just take a book and a cabin in the mountains.
Right.
My gosh. Yeah.
Let me look at the birds and
yeah.
forget
As
about
long
the
as I
bees.
have my dog, I am good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think in regards to the whole permission thing too, like we talked about earlier, it doesn't have to be now or ever. So I think the other part of this is that you also don't have to be in a relationship to feel whole.
Yeah.
And so, you talked about like the example of like a 60-year-old who loses their spouse to a massive heart attack, right? Just because you're 60 and you have plenty of life left to live, it's not anyone else's timeline. It's not anyone else's framework to know or to tell you what is best for your life. If it's not a desire for you, if you don't feel like you are incomplete, if you feel whole, not having another person in your life, that is completely okay, because as we reiterated in our New Year's resolution show, you are enough. You are enough. But, love is a gift that is a blessing to our lives. And if we're fortunate enough to experience it, that's wonderful. And if you are someone who experiences it more than once or twice in your life, you are doubly blessed.
Right.
And everyone will have an opinion about what is best for you, but their timeline for you, it does not have to be your timeline.
There's a whole lot in this section of
this
little segment of love knows no bounds, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole lot there. There's a whole lot there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, and it really has to be about your reflection of, what your thoughts and feelings are about the path forward. Now, I think becoming comfortable with that, understanding what the voids are, and protecting yourself against some of the pitfalls that we talked about earlier is important, right? But I also want you to know from this conversation tonight, you are enough, and you don't have to have another person to make your life whole. My next point is something that I often see people struggle with, aka myself, and things like that.
Well, before you go on, let me stop you and go back just a little bit, Kasie,
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
kind of also say it goes both ways, right? Like I like what you're saying, that other people will tell you what's best for you, and that's not going to work. You have to be grounded in to explore yourself and really give yourself permission to have another partner if you want that. Be individual and single if that feels comfortable. I think we've gone both ways, but I want to put a little caveat here. Okay. A little caveat, because in that exploration of what's going on with me and what am I driving it, that fears can be a major driving force in there, right? So when you're exploring, what am I experiencing and what am I going through? What am I thinking about for what's next? I've become a widower. That's what a guy's called, by the way. Did you know that?
Yep.
Yep. I never knew that until a few years ago, but widower for guys, widow for girl. Why we have to do that, I don't know, but we do. What am I fearful about is a primary question I want you to ask, because that will guide you in understanding a little bit more depthy on what's driving my behavior. and what's driving my hesitation, or what's driving my avoidance, what's driving my decisions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's a perfect segue into what I was getting ready to say anyway, which is, even if it's driving you in the direction of love, loving after losing is difficult. There's your quote, Neil. Loving after losing is difficult. And so, it's easier for us to love sometimes than to receive and be loved again. And I think that that's something that's actually opposite of what we think to be true. Like, I think sometimes we think it's a lot easier for someone to, love me, accept me, and all that. But the truth is after a loss, it goes exactly to the point you're talking about. That fear receptor of if every time I love someone, they leave my life,
Right.
or I've lost them, those fears can become so overwhelming that we start to feel guarded, or we start to feel taken aback and like, is this going to happen again? And maybe I will self-sabotage this relationship or end it before it progresses because I can't
go through that again.
Same
I ain't
level
doing that
of pain again.
Like you said, I'm happy as all arc with my dog, man. It's great.
That's right. That's right. And
Is that
so
fear?
we just try to not allow that love to infiltrate our life. And when we do that, what we're doing is, I would arguably say, we're trying to numb out a little bit, right? We're trying to numb out. And the problem is that might work for a moment, but you can't numb out pain and sorrowful parts of relationships and keep joy and love. If you're numbing out, you're
some
numbing
people
it
are
all
really
out.
good at it, though.
They are.
Some
They make
people
really good college tries at it. But
I tell you,
if you're numbing, you can't keep joy and love. You're numbing all.
Yeah. Okay. That point. Yeah. Yeah. I missed your point. Because where I thought you were going, I even made that point on the show before, which I think is really a really good one. I haven't used that, but I will. Like, you numb joy as much as you numb the pain. But people can numb for a long time.
They can.
And boy, like that's what I meant by some people are really good at that. I'm talking about years, man.
Yeah.
People out there, there are people that are really, really expert at numbing. And boy, I that makes my clinical boots shake a little bit with people that are really good at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, numbing comes from that, that initial kind of shock to our nervous system, right? The easiest way for me to get through this is to numb out. And so when we numb, though, what we do, create a situation where we can dote on other people, we can pour love onto other people, but we make it almost impossible to be receptive of those same types of big emotions from other people. We make it hard to love us, and we don't let people in, and we don't let down those defense mechanisms. And when that happens, what we eliminate is just being completely vulnerable. And if you're not going to be able to be vulnerable, then you're not able to really invite someone into your life in a meaningful and intimate way.
Hey, the door's closed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Door's closed. Is that what you mean? What all would you say, Kasie, makes it hard to be loved? Because I wonder if there's other pieces about feeling lovable. Are you speaking to that much?
Yeah. So I think that's the thing, is that I think what it starts with is exactly what you said. The acknowledgement of I'm lovable, right?
Okay, yeah.
And I think it becomes kind of that distorted thought, or like, errors in our thinking pattern, like I am unlovable. And when we have that as our mindset, or I don't want to be loved, or I'm not able to be loved again like I was loved before, then it's almost like putting on a pair of sunglasses, and we view the whole world through that lens. And when we view the world through that lens, what happens is every situation gets that kind of bias in how we see it. And so when someone approaches me after the demise of a relationship and they want to get to know me and they want to get a connection, they get so much up into the point of where I feel comfortable. And then either I leave the relationship, I sabotage the relationship, or I allow my own inner voice about I can't be loved again like I was loved before take over. And I start to appear less confident and things like that. And the person then tells me, you're really hard to love. Like it's hard to love you, or it's hard to get in. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
Yeah.
doing another thought here, but go on.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and so what I do find is that people do want to have connection, and they do want to refine ways to experience life with other people. And sometimes that can be just as comfortable with a group of friends, but other times we really do want to develop new relationships. So when we're able and we're ready to reconnect, I think it is a way towards healing. So back when we said that, it doesn't have to be like where you get complete resolution with the previous relationship to move on to the next. This is part of the process. When we find in a healthy way a new relationship to enter into, that is part of the healing, because what you're beginning to do is you're beginning to reconnect to yourself, right? Like what we just said, you're reconnecting to yourself and the parts of yourself that you continue to put out there and say, this is what's right about me. Go ahead, Chris.
So I like to dumb things down a little bit. I have a simple brain.
Okay.
Here's what I want you to realize and understand, because I love what you're saying. And I want to try to dumb it down for my simple brain, right? When you are dating somebody or getting to know somebody, you are attaching to somebody. You're getting closer and you're getting closer, and you move in a way very threatening, very scary, vulnerability, particularly after a loss, all of that. But here's the thing that's happening along that way. You are learning about yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what's happening, right? Like y'all listen to the show might not realize that, but when you're dating and you're loving somebody else, you're really kind of finding out all kinds of data and information about me and how I operate and how I function. Even if you're looking at blaming the other person for not doing it right or whatever you're frustrated with or whatever, you're really getting information about yourself in so many volumes of ways, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
for instance, it's easy to love somebody that's loving you back. What do you learn about yourself when somebody's not loving you back? Are you still loving? Like we date, and on our marriages, we're learning so much. So what is it to say that when you begin to attach with somebody else, think about all the benefits of what you're learning from a new relationship that is budding and growing that you're attaching to, and new things from a new perspective that you're going to learn about yourself. Like, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that to me, that quintessentially is the best part of relationships, is learning another person while simultaneously learning about yourself,
Right.
and exploring life together in a way, because there's no manual, right? It's not like, hey, here's how we do this is how you do relationship.
Don't you
And
find,
so
Kasie, when you're doing therapy with people and they start talking about their closer relationships, dating partners primarily or whatnot, that there's so many opportunities in that therapy session or in that therapy relationships about that person to explore?
oh yeah.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. Like
Like for
sometimes I
young,
will literally stop and say, like, let's say that out loud again.
yeah, let's just say that again loud, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So for
let's say that
young
out loud again.
therapists out there, honestly, if you're struggling or in a stuck spot, talk about a relationship. You're going to find something.
Yeah, for sure. And so my last point here before we kind of have closing thoughts is that rediscovering love is a way to heal. And so I do believe that reconnection to essential people in your life really is part of the recovery process when you're in a grieving situation. And like I said before, I'm not even talking necessarily about having to reconnect romantically to someone. but reconnecting to people that are essential to your life is part of that recovery process. And if you are someone who finds themselves, having the desire to reconnect to a romantic partner, then I think what you are doing is you are preparing yourself to have one of the best experiences of your life if you're able to do so in a healthy way. So if you kind of listen to this podcast, particularly this podcast, of course, right? No, but if you've done the work on yourself to be at a healthy emotional place where things left off, you're doing some self exploration, you're learning about other people, you're learning about yourself, and now you're at a place where you're reconnecting in a meaningful way with a romantic partner. Your experience is going to be one of joy and love and laughter, and even the pain and sorrow is not going to be as devastating as you once anticipated, because you have done the work on yourself to improve your emotional understanding
And emotional strength.
and emotional strength. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The human emotional experience, right? The more that you work through it, the more that you work through things, the more that you engage yourself, the more confident and comfortable and stronger you get, really. You get knocked down a
Absolutely.
peg or two from time to time, but yeah, and there's incredible healing and moving forward. I love what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'll take us out of here in a minute, Kasie, but why don't you sum us up with your thoughts, like you said, that you're closing with.
Yeah. So my closing thoughts today are pretty simplistic. To love and be loved, you have to first love yourself. And so I think whenever we go through an experience that is the demise of a relationship, the loss of a spouse, so on and so forth, we can do a lot of blaming in those situations. But I think when we're reflective and you look at yourself and you think about the opportunities that you took, the chances and the risks that came with that relationship, also be reflective on the rewards, because even though the relationship has ended, there was something significant that it gave to you in your life. And maybe it's a lesson, maybe it's a blessing, maybe it's children, maybe it's, a plethora of things. But when you're talking about the risk of a relationship, also consider the rewards. And when you look at those rewards and you reflect on yourself, know that to love another person moving forward, reconnect to the things you love about yourself.
Well said. Well done. Kasie, thank you for bringing these teaching points to us with something that I
Yeah.
think a lot of times people are dealing with in the new year as things
Yeah.
end, things are beginning anew and whatnot. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're still with us, thank you for joining us. And listen, I want you to understand that this is mostly a message about hope. When you have losses, it is a time that you're in great pain. It is a time that you've gone through a traumatic situation. That's not too dramatic to say, but you have enough in you. You are whole. You can do it. You can do it. You can get through this. And then you can make grounded decisions moving forward in your life, whatever stage of life you're in, whether you're maybe a teenager listening to this or you're in retirement listening to this. This really applies to so many walks and stages of life. And I want this to be an uplifting, hopeful message about grieving, dealing with loss, and growing in yourself to renew potentially in a new relationship or share with others what you've learned. So in 2022, as you move forward, even if you've reached a certain demise, have hope, keep growing, stay strong. You can do this. And we'll see you guys next week. Take care.
Bye, everyone.